Well, hello and welcome to this XpoNorth session for writers on how to pitch your work. I'm Peter Urpeth. I'm the writing and publishing sector advisor for XpoNorth, working in the Highlands and Islands of Scotland. And I'm very pleased to have with me today literary agent Jenny Brown and crime writer extraordinaire Alison Belsham. Now, they're both going to introduce themselves and their own work as we go through the event today. So I'll just press on. What we're going to do today, first of all, is we're going to have a look at actually what is XpoNorth's tweet pitch, which is due to take place on the 21st, Friday the 21st of January. It's been running for 7 years now, and we'll just quickly run through some of the basics of the actual technicalities of that process of taking part in the tweet pitch. Then going to come to Alison, who's going to look at the actual real considerations for writers and what makes a good pitch, and particularly as well what makes a good tweet pitch. And then towards the end we'll come to a Q&A. So for participants, so if you'd like to submit a question, please use the Q&A button on the bottom line of your screen rather than the chat to submit those. And please do feel free as well to use the chat to communicate with us or with anyone else tuning into this session. Can I also just say, please get your questions in as we go along and from as early as possible, so that we know they're there and we have a chance to consider them. So I'd just like to start then today by giving the very bare bones of what is the tweet pitch. The tweet pitch in 2 weeks' time will be the 7th time that XpoNorth has run a tweet pitch on Twitter. And it's been a very valuable and worthwhile process, producing many connections, and many books have actually arisen out of this process. A tweet pitch is, of course, governed by the nature of tweets themselves, which are 280 characters. That this, of course, doubled a few years ago. It used to be 140, it's now 280. So people pitching have now got the luxury of having double the amount of words to use. So it's 280 characters, but you must use the hashtag XpoNorth. That's hashtag, the symbol hashtag XpoNorth, which is 7 characters. So that deducts from the 280. So you do in fact have 271 characters to make your own pitch and for the tweet to be acceptable. It's a pitch that's followed. The hashtag is followed by agents and publishers in Scotland who respond, look through the hashtagged submissions, and it's open to writers of fiction and non-fiction, for adults and for children. But the rule is that to make a tweet pitch, you must actually be a writer that's based in Scotland. Now, having said that, I know this session today is very much designed to be useful for writers pitching to any event, or in fact, even in traditional paper form. The things that apply to the tweet pitch are things that apply to how you pitch your work anyway. So this, I hope, is a very useful session for people wherever you're based in Scotland or out with Scotland. So that's just the very basics of this thing. And what I'd first like to do is to come to Jenny and to ask Jenny, what is the actual, what are the benefits and the positives of the tweet pitch for agents and publishers, and of course for writers themselves?
Thanks, Pete, and hello everybody. I love the tweet pitch. I've been involved in it with Peter since the very beginning, and as an agent based in Scotland, and as an agent who specifically likes working with writers based in Scotland, it's a fantastic way of getting, seeing what writers are interested in writing, what sort of ideas they're pitching to us. And it's egalitarian, it's democratic. You do not have to know somebody and get an endorsement from somebody before you approach an agent or a publisher during the Twitter pitch. in fact, you don't have to have your manuscript finished in order to pitch your idea. And two very successful pitches for me in the past. One was from a writer called Esther Rutter, who pitched an idea when it was only 140 characters. Do you remember that? And she pitched an idea called This Golden Fleece, A Very British History of Wool. And I thought, what a fantastic idea. And I got in touch with Esther, and later on we can talk about what happens after the pitch if you do get interest in your ideas. I got in touch with Esther. She hadn't got very far with the idea, but by the time of the London Book Fair, which was 3 months later, we had a proposal and sample chapters, which I showed to publishers during the London Book Fair, and we had multiple offers for that proposal. And the book was published as by Granta in 2019. She's now going to her second book, is going to be published later on this year. And I think 4 years ago, there was a pitch for another non-fiction book, which was partially complete, by a writer called Catherine Munro, who was writing about Shetland ponies and the how Shetland ponies are uniquely adapted to the environment of Shetland and the people of Shetland. And that book is going to be published in June this year by Ebury. So quite a long gestation for that one. Are many of the ideas which publishers and agents might respond to during this pitch session in 2 weeks' time will have a much faster gestation. But it's just to let you know that, you might have a project you're thinking about, you've maybe written 1 or 2 chapters, you can still pitch it. Obviously, if it's a novel, we would love to see as much material as possible before you start pitching.
So, Gigi, can we just drill down a little bit further into the differences for the different types of writing? What applies in the tweet pitch in terms of fiction, non-fiction, and indeed in children's work? You touched on there that a book doesn't have to be complete, or a draft. What are the differences? What are the different requirements? What would agents and publishers be looking for in terms of fiction, non-fiction, and children's work, and how do they differ?
Well, fiction, normally, if you're submitting fiction, a novel to an agent or a publisher, they would expect to see the whole thing. If they ask for it. You might be asked in the initial submission, in a sort of normal pitch situation, for the first 3 chapters. But if an agent or publisher likes it, they'd want to get in touch with you as the writer and want to see the rest pretty quickly. And so fiction is sold on the whole, it's in it as a finished manuscript. Whereas non-fiction, it's quite different. Non-fiction on the whole is sold on proposal. And a proposal will say, why this book? Why are you the best person to be writing this book? Why it's timely? Why write about it now? And an idea of the comparative titles. What else is on the shelf? And why is your book different? And we'd expect to see probably 10,000, 15,000, maybe 20,000 words, but you don't have to complete it in order to secure a publishing deal. And for children's work, again, we would expect to see the whole finished manuscript. And it might be a picture book. We'd expect and sometimes it's the writer and the illustrator. Writer is the illustrator as well, but often a writer will be matched with an illustrator by a publishing house. So you don't have to feel that you might have a picture book text, but you don't need to provide the pictures unless you are also an illustrator. Those would be for the classic submission package. If you're going direct to a publisher or an agent. Of course, for the tweet pitch, we're just getting that snapshot, that 280 character snapshot.
Just in terms of children's work, Is it important in the actual tweet pitch to indicate things like age group as well as whether it's like an illustrated book? Would you put that actually in the tweet pitch itself for agents or publishers to respond to?
Yes, I would say try and give an indication of the age. You might say it's middle grade, or you might just use, because you're going to be short of characters, you might just say YA for young adult, but do give an indication of how you're pitching that book, so that we know if it's a picture book or a book for 8-year-olds or whatever.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Now, one of the things that does arise, there's been one question on this already, in fact, 2 or 3 questions, I think, on this matter already, is how many times can or should a writer pitch both the same work? Can they pitch different work? So what's the kind of numerics in this process?
Right, we don't make any hard and fast rules about this for the tweet pitch, but I would say as a rule of thumb, have your basic pitch. You might want to pin that to your Twitter account on the day, your absolutely fantastic Twitter pitch. You might also want to pitch your book in a slightly different way. You might have maybe, I would say, don't pitch your book more than once an hour. You might have up to 6, you might pitch up to 6 times during the day, but I would say make it slightly different each time. So if it's the same agent or the same publisher who's reading your tweets, they're discovering a little bit more about your project each time. You know, you might bring out a different character or the setting or whatever else. But I would say don't bombard with exactly the same pitch, exactly the same tweet too many times.
Yeah, I think the reality is that it's a process that it can be very distracting if someone just constantly repeats the same tweet or something very similar and bombards the stream across that time. That's more likely to have the opposite effect, I think, than a positive one. You know, you have to view this from the sort of agents and publishers perspective who are actually looking at this at the other end, and what they need is clarity and for the process to be you know, a user-friendly one for them. So by all means, please do pitch the same work in slightly different ways, and certainly you're open to pitch all sorts of different work. If you've written different types of work in different fiction, non-fiction, children, whatever, then you're more than welcome to pitch those. But I think a sense of restraint and have a purpose to repeat tweets that isn't just constantly posting the same thing, you know. So think about the purpose of those things. Can we just drill down a little further, Jen, into what is the process after that? Now, this, I assume, is very similar to what happens if you send a package to a publisher or agent with a cover letter and a synopsis and 3 chapters and so on. At the other end, at the receiving end of these tweets, there are agents and publishers, a great list we've got this year from across Scotland. What's their process? What do they do next? You're muted, Jenny, sorry.
Apologies. As an agent, I am on Twitter all day reading these tweets. And if I like the sound of something, I will get in touch with that writer saying, oh, that sounds great. Please let me see more. And I'll either direct them to my own email address or to our website where it has information about how to submit. And I know from past experience, some agents and publishers maybe won't call in only 1 or 2 projects that they see that day, whereas others may be calling in a lot of projects. So once you have submitted in the way that they have requested, or just set up a dialogue, perhaps you get a response for something that actually you haven't progressed with. But just, I would say, as a writer, just be honest where it is, and let the publisher or agent know, saying, I would love to be in touch in another month's time when I further have progressed with this. I mean, I would say it's a great opportunity to start those dialogues, and that keep that communication channel open. Now, if it's like, the situation with this Golden Fleece book, we having read a little bit more about Esther's project, we then had a meeting. We decided to work together, and then we just communicated until we had what we thought was the perfect proposal and sample chapters. You may, as a writer, find you get more than one note of interest from an agent or from an editor, which is great news. So wait and see what response you get once you have submitted more work, what kind of feedback you're getting. Don't be afraid to prompt if you have to wait too long. And then try and get a meeting. If you get offers of representation from more than one agent, I would say try and get a meeting with them. It's so easy now to have a Zoom meeting, whereas before, you might have to trek to Edinburgh, Glasgow, or London even. Try to get a meeting with them and start talking about the project, and make sure that their vision for your work matches your own.
And just a little bit more, what's the kind of time scales that people should expect? I know that the responses to the tweet pitch can be, on the day for some, but when a book is taken on by an agent or a publisher, it obviously enters then into the, shall we say, traditional routes of publishing. And what are the current kind of time scales? Say if you took my novel, it was a commercial, trade orientated book, what's the kind of stepping stones time wise between me doing the tweet pitch and a book being on the shelves in Inverness W.H. Smith's railway station?
Excellent. Well, look forward to that, Peter. And
me too.
You've delivered your manuscript after the tweet pitch. I've read it. I think you need a little bit more work here or there. You rather long-winded. Your manuscript's 150,000 words long, Peter. You should know better that an average novel, if there's such a thing, is between 70,000, 95,000 words. So we're going to edit it down, so it's a much more commercial proposition in length. And then when we're both happy that it's ready to be seen by publishers, we then submit. Now, submission, depending on the time of year, publishers get very busy before book fairs, like London Book Fair in April and Frankfurt, which is in October. So I would avoid pitching. As an agent, I would avoid pitching before those months, immediately before those months, unless it was very high concept and we were going to get multiple deals at the London Book Fair. And if it gets taken on by a publisher, it's likely now that it won't be published. It won't be published this year. There's a possibility it might be published in 23, but for a lot of debuts tend to be published in the springtime. And it's now getting quite late for a publisher to schedule your novel for spring 2023. So we're probably looking at the early part of 2024.
Yeah, it's very interesting that. I mean, I think one of the great strengths of the tweet pitch is the fact that it circumvents a lot of the traditional process, which I think is really important for writers and some groups of writers who might have been perhaps felt that they were excluded from that sort of process in the past. It's a very open process, but the rest of the process has to operate. This is a gateway to the publishing industry, not a bypassing of the rest of it. We can provide a great access point and a very unique access point, but we can't change the rest of the industry. And it served us well. I mean, I think the tweet pitch, I gave up counting at around 40 books when it had either directly or indirectly had led to the publication of that sort of number of books. So it's been a very efficient gateway. Can I just say, I mean, obviously we get a great many works pitched every year to the tweet pitch. I've always thought that there was a huge benefit for writers who might not actually be successful in this process as well, that there's benefits in just participation in an event like this. How would you summarize those sorts of benefits, Jenny? What's the plus side by just being there, by going through all of this?
I think there's huge benefits in just participating. You might just follow the tweets this year if you're just not quite sure how to present your work, or you might just start to really respond to fellow writers' pitches. I think one of the great things about the Tweet Pitch Day is the sense of community amongst Scottish writers, whether they're established Scottish writers, new or complete newbies. I've always enjoyed seeing how fellow writers respond to pitches, and with such encouragement. Really good.
Yeah, I think that's been amazing, and I think that the sense of that has been really heightened during this period of lockdown and the pandemic as well. You know, this is something you do from home, and we can't participate in things. There haven't been the book fairs or the live author events in the same number. There have been, you know, cancellations, some are on, some are not. It's a very frustrating time to be a writer in many ways. But the creation of an asset, keep writing, and things like the Tweet Pitch, I think, are a great celebration of what can be achieved, and also just the incredible scale and diversity of writing in Scotland is on display on the day of the Tweet Pitch, there in front of your eyes. And I think it's a huge benefit to actually immerse yourself in what people are doing, other people are doing, to be aware of where the energy points are, how people are putting their work out there. And I know very shortly going to come to Alison for the details of what makes a great pitch, what the content of that of a good pitch is. But just to say, I think the thing about trying to conceptualize your work in 271 characters, in that number of words, it's a really, really useful writing tool in and of itself. There's nothing better than knowing the bare bones of your own story and what it is in terms of making it the best piece of work it can possibly be before you tweet pitch it or before you send it out to a publisher or agent. Now, I'd like to move on, if I can, to Alison, and get into the kind of the bare bones of the real technicalities of what makes a good pitch. But just to say, I know Alison's going to introduce her work as well, just to say that non-traditional pitching routes have been a really kind of major part of your own work as a writer, your own progress as a writer, Alison.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So my own big break came as a result of pitching when I live pitched at Bloody Scotland in 2016, I think it was. And I pitched a book called The Tattoo Thief. And despite the advice to make sure your book is written, I actually pitched this book before I'd written any of it, because I thought, oh, if I go and pitch, I'll get some feedback, and then, you know, the lovely panel that will give me feedback will actually tell me whether this book has got any legs, whether this idea has got any legs. And to my great surprise, I won the pitching event. And of course, then I had to admit I hadn't written anything yet. But thankfully, Jenny sort of came on board and agreed to be my agent and shepherded me through the whole process. The book was written and we managed to get a deal with Orion for it. And as they say, the rest is history. And it's now been a 3-book series. It's crime thriller about serial killers. So that, for me, that was how I got my way into publishing. And it means that I have always been really enthusiastic about pitching. I think it's a brilliant way of presenting your book. It's a way of making your book stand out much more than just sending in through the usual channels onto the slush pile where it can kind of lie hidden for God knows how long. it's a really good way of putting your book out there. So really, I'm going to talk to you about what makes a good pitch. It's live pitching. You generally have 2 minutes or 3 minutes to talk about your book, which seems like hardly anything at all. But when you then compare that to a tweet is literally, nothing, one sentence or 2 short sentences. And what you're probably thinking is, okay, my book is 90,000 words. How can I encompass 90,000 words in one tweet? And the answer to that is you actually can't. So you have to work out how you can present your book, 350 pages, in one tweet. And so don't start with your book and try and shrink it down. What I always say with for live pitching as well as tweet pitching, start with your premise. And Peter was more or less touching on this as well. Your premise is the one sentence elevator pitch type thing that explains your book, and it generally takes the form of protagonist has some sort of aim or want or desire, and there's an obstacle. So, for example, the premise for The Wizard of Oz is Dorothy is swept away by a tornado and must find a wizard if she wants to get home. That's literally, so if you can shrink your book down to that, knowing your premise anyway is incredibly important to really be able to talk to people about your book. So before you even start thinking about your tweet, if you haven't worked out what your premise is, do that first of all. Once you've got that, make sure you know all the rules of the pitching event that you're entering. They're all usually quite similar, but they do vary slightly, and there's no point in breaking rules. So just make sure you know that. Make sure you know what the hashtags are or hashtag. Put that on your tweet first of all, so you've got the characters there for it, so you don't come to the end of the tweet that you're crafting and suddenly find you don't have space for it. Because the hashtag is absolutely critical to make sure that the agents and editors see your work. So coming into the actual part of the tweet that you need to craft, what you're trying to do is create a hook that will encourage editors and agents to say, I want to know more. So you've got to make it fascinating. You've got to make it unique and different. You've got to include the jeopardy. What makes the stakes high in your book? What is the problem? So if you just say, oh, it's a timeless romance, that's not very exciting. It's not telling them anything. You've got to put in the specifics, try and be specific. So what I'd say is use short, punchy sentences that can create an impact. Be very specific. So for example, if you said, Joe goes on a journey with his dog, that tells you something. But if it doesn't tell you very much though, if you say, instead of saying Joe, if you say rookie cop goes on a journey with his dog, or retired teacher goes on a journey with her dog, you've got 2 very different stories there. If you say retired teacher goes on a journey with her Great Dane, it's very different to rookie cop goes on a journey with his Chihuahua. So what you need to do is every word needs to be as specific as you can make it, so that you're creating a sense of what the story might be. And in that way, you're also avoiding cliches as well. So the more specific you can make it, the better. And the other thing to consider is including comps. These are books that your book could be compared to. So you might say Harry Potter meets, I don't know, Jaws or something. Jaws isn't a book, it's a film, but you know what I mean? So you take 2 books, but you need to choose them quite carefully. So don't pick huge blockbusters and say my book is like that. Don't pick really obscure books, because if the agents and publishers haven't particularly heard of those books, it won't help. really think hard about what books are similar to the book you're pitching, what they can say about your book. It can be a way of saying what your genre is without taking up extra characters. If the comic books are in the same genre, if they're in a similar, you know, if they're in that a tighter kind of area of the genre, like, you know, police procedural or whatever. So choose books that can say as much about your book as possible. Is it essential to include comps? No, it's not essential. I think it some like the inclusion of comps. Others don't particularly care for it because it sort of distracts from what your book is, and your book is unique. So it's up to you to judge whether you want to include them. And I would say in that part of your decision must be, how much do the comps say? How much can they tell people about my book? So that's, it's not an easy decision to make, but it's one you'll have to make. As I've said, remember to include the hashtag. Do you need to include the title of your book? You don't have to. And again, this is a decision you must make on what the title tells someone about your book. You know, if it's a sort of, does what it says on the tin title, like my title was The Tattoo Thief, and it literally said what the serial killer did. So that's that would be a good title to include. That something about the book, but you know, if your title is the name of a person or whatever, then it's not telling anyone anything about the book, so it's not necessary to include it. You know, you can use those words, use those characters for something else, some further useful information. Literally every word of your tweet needs to contribute some information. So, you know, you need to make clear what genre your book is. If it's for a particular age, if it's a children's book or a young adult's book, what sort of age group it is. And as Jenny said already, if you tweet more than once, use different tweets. Don't just spam the same tweet out, because A, that can be annoying, and B, you're wasting the opportunity to include extra information. So if you're tweeting more than once, craft different tweets, because one may be more successful than the other. And I think that's it, really. Just, I think my final word of advice is, if you're going to enter a tweeting competition, look at the hashtag of that competition and look at the other tweets and make your own mind up which ones grab you, which ones would you like to read, which ones are successful, and then kind of think about why they're successful, why they've hooked you, and then you'll kind of start to get a feel for what works and what doesn't work. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thanks so much, Alison. Can I just say as well, coming back to the thing about multiple tweets, just to say that you can't really approach the tweet pitch as an opportunity to create a thread of 1,000 characters and your pitch is spread across that. What you've got to bear in mind is that the agent, is that agents or publishers might not see the other parts of that. You know, the first part might not actually catch them enough. So if you are going to take the option to do more than one tweet for a work, make sure that every tweet stands alone. So it can't just be a kind of an accumulative ladder of a thread, and that people have got to hunt around for the rest of it. That's not tweet pitch. So take the opportunity to reflect on your work in different ways, for sure. But every tweet has got to stand on its own. It will probably be seen in isolation, or maybe two or three of them. And if you're approaching this on the basis of a thread, people only see entry 5, 7, and 9. It's not going to make a lot of sense. So make sure that each tweet actually does have complies with all of the kinds of advice that Alison has just given. I think what I'd like to do, if I can, is actually dive into some of the questions that are being asked, because they sort of take this forward. There's one I'd like to focus on just very quickly. Christine asks, what does premise mean? And I think it's quite an important question. What is the premise of a novel, or even of a work of non-fiction?
Shall I take this one?
Sure.
Yeah. So the premise of a novel is your one sentence, or it could sometimes run to two sentences, is a summing up of exactly what the novel's about. So it's okay. I'll use my novel just because it's the one I can think of most easily. So the Tattoo Thief is Marnie Mullins, who's the central character. Marnie Mullins discovers a dead body, which leads her into, which draws her. In fact, I can't even kind of articulate it myself very easily. It's not very easy to do when you haven't prepared it, but it is, you know, she finds a dead body, she gets drawn into a case with a serial killer and ends up becoming a target. And that sums up for you very quickly what's going to happen, what the jeopardy is, and obviously for her, the desire is not to get murdered. And so, you know, how's she going to escape from that? It's being able to tell someone what the essence of your book is. And it's quite important to know that when you're talking to publishers and agents, that they will expect you to be able to sum up your book in one sentence. So you need to think about that very carefully. I hope that's answered the question and explained it not terribly articulately.
Jenny, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, the premise is really, yes, it's the essence of the book, it's the heart of the book. And what we want to see in these pitches is, because in the past, sometimes they've been beautifully crafted pitches, but they describe the character, they describe the setting. But what's the critical turning point? What is it that's going to happen to these characters? What's going to happen to this setting? So make sure that your premise, your essence of the book encapsulates that as well. And one way of thinking about what is your book about, what is the premise, how are you pitching it, is this is the beginning of the marketing for the book. Because if you as the writer know how you're pitching the book, I as the agent, I'm going to use that or a slight version of that when I'm pitching your novel or your non-fiction book to an editor. And just imagine the editor who loves your book is at the acquisitions meeting when you hope that the editor is going to persuade people in rights and publicity and sales and fellow editors that this is the book they want to publish. They're going to use an essence of that. And then when the book's taken on, that pitch then is being used to the sales force of publishers when they're going to booksellers, when they're going to Amazon, when they're going to Waterstones. And then just think about the bookseller on the shop floor who is talking to readers all the time and is promoting and talking about the books that are coming out or have just come out. I bet it'll be a form of that original pitch. So that's why it's just so important that as a writer, you own that pitch, and it's as good as it can possibly be, as persuasive as it can possibly be. I'm not sure I actually answered the question you just asked me, Peter, but
that was it's very good and very interesting. I mean, I think there's so many positives actually in the writing process about having a grasp on this. I know that different writers approach that. Some start with a kind of particular premises for their work, others it emerges. But I think, you know, in the completion of a good draft, I think it's kind of, you've got to have a hold of this, you know, because self-editing, I think, starts from this understanding of what your work is. You know, and so on. Just to go into a couple of the questions that are there, which are more technical ones, which I'll answer myself. A number of people have asked the same thing in slightly different ways, which is, do we have a list of agents and publishers participating and what they're looking for? We don't make that available, and we never have made that available. Jenny, you were...
Yes, I was just going to say, I can see that a number of people have been asking this question. And what happened last year was that a number of the publishers and agents who are taking part in the days just leading up to Expo North tweet pitch actually tweeted and said, I'm particularly hoping I'm going to find non-fiction, I'm looking for nature writing, I'm looking for crime fiction. And I think it would be a really good idea if we encourage as many editors and agents who are taking part just to do that in the days leading up and use the hashtag Expo North so that you as writers can search through those tweets and see what who's taking part and what they're looking for.
Yeah, great. I think, I mean, it also in the past we've kind of moved to preserve the anonymity, as it were, for the agents and publishers. Some want to not have their participation made public, you know, just to manage their own workloads and so on, because there, you know, a lot of communication is generated this way. But yeah, just to reiterate what Jenny said, that actually lots of writers, even on the day, lots of publishers and agents on the day do make themselves known and actually say what they're enjoying and so on. So follow the stream, connect in the days beforehand, and a lot of that information does emerge in that way, but we don't actually have a list that we put online, and I don't think we're going to be in a position of doing that. It does create the situation, I suppose, that the tweet pitch is a little bit different from other pitching activities, in that if you're going to make a sort of an envelope, a marketing approach in an envelope sent to agents and publishers, we'd say research to the very last moment every aspect of the person you're sending that to, and don't just cold call any agent or any publisher with any manuscript, you know. So, but to some extent we are a little bit nearer to that type of and I suppose that means you've got to make the pitch, the tweet pitch, appeal to yourself as well, feel that it reflects your work, so that any reader of that gets a sense of it. You know, you're not pitching something very specific to an agent or publisher. This is something that is available to a very broad range, and you know, it has to have that kind of stability and appeal as a pitch in and of itself. Let me just have a look through the other questions here. So just to again drill down into this, Anonymous asks, is about the specific descriptions of adult fiction and also of non-fiction. Do you want people to say this is historical fiction or this is memoir, and so on? Are those descriptors important for adult work as indeed they are for children's pitches?
I'll come in on that and say you need to make it quite clear, you know, whether your book is fiction or non-fiction. If it's historical, you must make clear what the genre is, because certain agents and editors are looking for particular genres. So I would say yes, it is important to make those definitions clear in your pitch.
Yeah, okay. And another question here. I'm going to ask this one simply because a few people have mentioned it, and I saw it came up in the chat as well, about IP and copyright protection of tweets. Jenny, can I ask you, what's your take on that, or Alison, whoever wants to come in on this, that there's a risk to work by it being put in a public forum in this kind of way?
I can answer this. Intellectual property rights, so the copyright of your work, applies to your written word specifically. You cannot copyright an idea. So if you have an idea, say an amazing crime novel idea, you don't own the copyright for that. It's about, copyright applies to specifically the way you write it, the specific characters and events that you portray in your writing, and someone is deemed to have infringed your copyright if they've actually used your words. So in anything where you're describing a novel, that doesn't have copyright, and it's not something that I would think you really need to worry about, because literally every novel idea in the world has been written several times. So, you know, if you say I'm writing a book about a policeman who does this and the murderer acts like this, if you do a lot of research, you'll find that books already exist with that plot line, and it's not going to be copyrighted, and you won't yourself be infringing their copyright. It's your specific words that hold intellectual property rights. So your tweet isn't something that, your tweet is a very small description of a book, and it's not something that has copyright.
Jenny, is that something you'd add to?
We've never had a problem with the Twitter pitch in this way. We haven't had any IP issues which have ever been raised as a result of it. I guess you've just got to take that risk, and bearing in mind that great advice that Alison's just given about copyright. It is a tiny description of your idea, of your, it's less than 280 characters, as we've discussed. And I think you've just got to go with the spirit of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think it was yesterday or today that the publishing guru and also Twitter guru, Sam Missingham, was actually speaking about this very point, saying actually that ideas are much more common currency than really well written books, and it's that we're after. So they're not substitutes for each other, you know. So I wouldn't worry too much about the you know, the IP of a tweet or anything like that. You know, the real quality, the real thing that people are after is actually the high quality content of your work, of the book itself, not of the idea. You know, there's many people have many great ideas, but the actuality of it doesn't quite live up to the promise. So we're after, and all publishers and agents are after, the meat of the book, not just the idea. This is just the gateway to that. A number of questions being asked about localities. Now, this is a process for Scottish writers pitching to agents and publishers in Scotland. I think what you have to bear in mind here, I mean, we can't gatekeep Twitter. You know, I've got no way of applying a filter that stops people based elsewhere from putting this in. But I think it holds true as well, and I don't know whether Alison and Jenny will comment on this, that one thing you never want to do is to annoy the people that you're actually pitching to by breaking the rules of things like this. There are lots of opportunities. There will be some in your area. So I wouldn't recommend it, because I think, you know, you're likely to have that kind of backfire in a way, that if people feel that the very soft and gentle rules of the tweet pitch are being manipulated. I mean, obviously, if you're just away for a few days, that's different. You know, you don't have to be, but you know, I think we say your principal home has to be, that would be the sort of local government speak of it, wouldn't it? Has to be Scotland, and work based in Scotland isn't sufficient enough. But please do use all the other pitch options available. There's the traditional route. All of the agents and publishers are available anyway. I mean, you can find Scottish agents and publishers all over the publishing world, and if you think they're the right people for your work, then please do submit to them. So one or two genre things. True crime, is it okay to pitch true crime? The answer to that is yes. But Jenny or Alison, you're a crime fiction writer. Where are we at with true crime in Scotland? How's it doing?
I think, I mean, you know, I think there's a great interest in true crime in Scotland and in the rest of the world, and a good true crime story fascinates us, probably sometimes even more than fiction, because it's, you know, something that's true. You're like, wow, did that really happen? So I would say pitch it. Yes, go for it. It's, if you've come across some sort of undiscovered, really interesting true crime story, you could be sitting on gold dust. So I don't know, Jenny, how you feel about true crime.
Yeah, I think absolutely pitch it if you've got a good true crime story. And there are publishers in Scotland who are really interested in this genre. Yeah, so go for it, please.
Yeah, it's always been great in Scotland, and some of Scotland's publishers have done made crime fiction into a real art form as well. So I think we always I don't want to encourage crime, but you know what I mean. Somebody, Mary said, do we have hashtags for genres? I'll answer that quickly. We used to have, but what we actually found was it created such a broad range of different hashtags that actually become more confusing in the end. And we settle now just that everyone uses the same hashtag XpoNorth, and we no longer go into lists and lists of hashtag XpoNorth 1, 2, and all the rest of it. So please identify it, make it clear. Yeah, somebody's put up things like FNFP, MYA, etc. That's all fine, because I think agents and publishers will be able to determine that what that means in terms of genre descriptions. So this is an interesting one, again, about autobiographical detail of the person making the pitch. Is it helpful to include your parts of your personal biography in the pitch process? Does it make a difference?
I would say you can put some of that information on your Twitter handle, so that anybody's interested in your pitch and looks you up on your Twitter bio, they'll see that. Where it might be useful, if you've just won a notable prize for writing, Scottish Book Trust or just SBT New Writer Award, whatever, that would be worthwhile. But otherwise, I wouldn't give up those precious characters. I'd put that in the bio, in your own bio.
I think perhaps if you were writing a memoir, it might be more relevant because it's actually about yourself. But otherwise, I don't think you have room for it if you're trying to describe a novel in one tweet. So I don't think you'd have space for it.
Okay, just coming to one of the other questions. The etiquette, this is Leslie's asked this, the etiquette of responding to several agents. So this does happen that some tweets are responded to by more than one agent or publisher. Jenny, how would you say that a writer should respond to that? I know you touched on this a little bit earlier, but just to reiterate, what would be the best way for someone to deal with multiple responses?
Fantastic if you get more than one response, and it's a sign that you've pitched very well. So I would find out what each of them wanted in terms of submission, follow it up with a submission whenever, whether it's immediately or when you've got more of your material ready. Start that dialogue, as I said earlier, and just see what feedback you get from them once they've read more of your work. And you might find that it doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't suit their list for whatever reason, or you might find that more than one agent is keen to offer you representation, which would be a fantastic situation. And as I said earlier, I think always try to have a meeting virtually by Zoom, or a meeting in real life with the agent to discover more about their list, about how they work, about how they see your work, and for them to discover more about you, and not only this project, but when an agent takes you on, they want to start up a relationship with you and your writing. So almost certainly not just this one project, but also what you're going to be writing in the future as well. And then you know, if you've got more than, if you've had a number of those meetings, it's your decision who you want to go with. So good luck. That'd be a great outcome from the tweet pitch.
Very nice problem to have, I think.
Yeah.
I imagine. So just we've got a few minutes left. Just going to run through some of these questions. Julie Adams asks, and I don't have the answer to this. Angie Crawford mentioned a growing areas quotes hot flush fiction. I've kept the central characters in my books in their 40s and 50s, apart from my YA work. Is this still an area agents might be looking for? I also use the North Highlands as a setting. Very good choice. Jenny, hot flush fiction, is that still a thing with agents and publishers?
Yes, I mean, I think we are getting more diverse in the kind of protagonists we're seeing in fiction. Thank goodness. We've had a whole spate of novels with protagonists who are well into their 70s and 80s. If you think about Richard Osman and his crime books, but also in kind of sort of more mature romantic comedies. Absolutely. So I'd say go for it. And what a lovely setting.
So yeah, just there's sorry, just one or two things I want to answer that Christine mentioned about Twitter and technicalities of that. I think you do have to be literate with Twitter. You've got a couple of weeks to establish an account and get to know its workings. We don't have a parallel process of emails or anything like that. Of course, you can approach agents, you can find the details on the internet and the sources and approach them by post as well, and somebody else was asking about what agents and publishers are interested in. Same thing there. This isn't a standalone process. It sits alongside the rest of the pitching world, whether that's in an envelope or in live in person. But we don't offer at this time any other parallel pitches. You can't email us with something. It has to be done on that Friday in a particular way. There are a couple of weeks to get up to speed with the technicalities required, and it's not that difficult. And for any writer anyway, I'd say a certain amount of familiarity with social media is going to be something you're going to have anyway. It's a reality of life. So I'd take a little bit of time to get on top of that. So really just I hope we've answered most of the kind of questions there. We're drawing to a close. I'd just like to finish by asking both of you about just returning to that thing about the spirit of kind of Scottish writing and the recommendation we've given, really, that writers should look at other writers' work and should really connect with the whole day as much as possible. Jenny, what's your feeling about that? I mean, this is a real opportunity for a very rich and steep learning curve for writers.
Absolutely. But, at the end of the tweet pitch, 9 p.m. last year, I just thought, what talent there is in Scotland. What amazing talent. And, it comes from everywhere. It's not the Central Belt, it's from the islands, it's from the Highlands, it's around Dumfries and Galloway, down to the borders. There are, fantastic ideas coming forward. And some of them, of course, aren't quite ready yet. Some of them maybe never be ready, but there are so many projects out there, which, I think we're very lucky position as agents and publishers, having this opportunity just to see what's out there and get that snapshot in one day. And as I said earlier, the fact it's egalitarian and this generosity of the community of writers in Scotland, is another astonishing thing. We're very lucky.
Yeah, and what about you, Alison? You've been an expert pitch maker. I mean, do you feel you've learned a lot from sitting and watching other people pitch their work in sort of live events as well?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, I have to say, when I did my pitching, I had no idea that pitching was a thing, and I didn't know anything about it. But I think that by watching other people pitch, you can learn so much, and by taking part, you can. Well, when I pitched, it changed my life. So that's why I'm so passionate about pitching. It literally changed my life. And so pitch, as I say to everyone, go for it. Just go for it. It's the most amazing experience. Enjoy doing it. take some pleasure out of crafting the best tweet you can, because it will tell you more about your book as well. And just jump on board with the whole thing, because it's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, thanks, Alison and Jenny. And I think the other thing is how great it is to actually see Scottish writing actually trending on Twitter across the UK, and at various times with that, and across Europe and so on as well. We've had times when we've been, number 2 in the, or number 1 in the trending list, and we're only being kept off the top. I think once it was by Boris Johnson, and another time by David Bowie. So we're in good company, as we know, in Scottish writing. I'd just like to say thanks so much to Jenny Brown and Alison Belsham. The tweet pitch takes place in 2 weeks' time, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m, Friday the 21st of January. Get on Twitter and follow the hashtag, and use the hashtag XpoNorth, XpoNorth. All for lots more details about that event, and indeed the rest of our work at XpoNorth. You can find us at xponorth.co.uk. And just a quick word of thanks also to all the agents and publishers who participate every year, to the Association of Scottish Literary Agents, who've been such a strong and helpful connection as well with all of this. And we really look forward to the day. See you online, see you on Twitter on the 21st of January. Thanks, everybody. Thanks.